Welcome to Custom Homebuilders Solutions, also known as CHS, a job costing, full accounting, and profit management software designed specifically for the professional home builder. Hello there, this will be a continuation video of a previous video we were doing about setting up your cost codes master, your basic cost codes that are the backbone of CHS that are used for roofing, framing, plumbing, etc. And then identifying purchase orders, change orders, lines in your job budget, actual job costs you posted, all with this very same kind of cost code. And in the previous video, we talked about setting up the cost codes, their titles, grouping them into groups, and that type of thing. In this video, we're going to talk about setting up some default pricing that you can use to just drop into new budgets. And we'll be setting that up on the very same cost codes master. So let's go ahead and click this cost codes master setup, and then cost codes master and generic items. Now in this tutorial we will talk about setting up master pricing that can be attached to the master cost codes, which can make it a whole lot easier when preparing job budgets and having a lot of things drop in for you when you first start a new budget. If you'll notice this section over here, and it says note, unit measure through tax buyer are simply defaults to load when opening a new budget. This is not a job budget. This is your cost codes master setup. But we have some default measures set up, some default quantities, some quantity percents, which I'll talk about in a minute, some default unit prices, and a default markup percent if we want. Most of the time we don't have something like that attached. And whether or not to tax the buyer if you're in a particular state that needs to tax the buyer for particular lines on your budget line. We will talk later in this tutorial about setting up some default notes that can drop into your budget, which are really handy for presenting a nice job proposal to your customers. Let's move down here for a second to plumbing. I always like to talk about plumbing. Notice that plumbing has a default measure set for it of living square feet, and in the previous tutorial we talked about how when you set up cost codes you open a window that looks like this, and this is where you would select your unit measure. You can set up additional unit measures to select from and then to be able to select from in some other places by clicking this pencil edit icon up here to the right of the title for unit measure. And a window will open that shows all the measures that you have set up. I think we supply about 100 when you start CHS, but if you'd like to add a new measure code, you click this button, type in what your new measure code is, and then click submit. I'm not going to do that right now, but as soon as you do submit, it will be in your list of measure codes. And then when you return to your window and do your drop down for unit measure, it will be in there. By selecting a unit measure, it means that first when you open a job budget based on this cost codes master, the program is going to look to the job to see if there's any measurement set up for that job that matches the unit measure for this cost code. If it finds that there is, when you open the new budget, it's going to drop in the quantity for, in this case, living square feet into your budget. It's going to drop the living square feet in as the quantity. And it's going to use the unit price to start with on your budget, which you can, of course, change on your budget. So we don't put any quantity here because actually we're going to base it on the unit measure that we select and what we've set up for the job. I'm going to close this and talk about the quantity percent field there. Notice that this builder has rough, top out, and final. And what this builder has done is actually split those into thirds. So it's like they're assuming that they will be getting a bid for the total plumbing, and they're going to split the total plumbing into these three cost codes based on living square feet. So they want the living square feet when they start a new budget to drop in as the quantity, and then they want to multiply that by 33.33% times the unit price to come up with what the budgeted total will be when you open a new budget. So you can see how that works there. Up under, let's see, framing labor, notice that they use frame square feet, and they have a unit price in here. Our unit prices might seem old to you or too low. You can always come set these. And all these will affect is when you open a new job budget that it'll drop that unit price in for you, which, like I say, you can change at the time you're doing the budget. But this is so that you can set up some defaults so that you can quickly open a new budget based on these defaults. Now notice that there's some other things that they don't use. They don't really refer to measure. Let's go see if we can find utilities up here, the utility connections. This builder has put sanitary toilet and assumes that most of the jobs are going to take 5 months. So they've selected a default measure of months, and they've gone ahead and typed in the default quantity of 5, and they say that sanitary toilet is $90 per month basically, and in general their average jobs take 5 months. So they're also assuming on dumpster that there'll be 5 pulls at $385. So in this case, there probably won't be any specs set up for your job or measurements with quantities attached, so the builder has set up the master to be based on some default quantities here. Maybe that makes some sense to you. You're setting up your master. We'll quickly start a new budget here in a second so you can see this. Now if you scroll down here looking at the quantities, notice that some of the quantities are still at 0. That means when you open a new job budget, those quantities will be 0 on that job budget. And if you really don't want to have to type in the quantity so that it'll calculate, the quantity times quantity percent and have to type in the quantity, and you decide that you just like all of these to be a quantity of 1, if they don't have a measure code, like this one doesn't have a measure code, so you'd like a 1 to go ahead and be there when you open your budget worksheet for those kinds of things. So when you first set up cost codes, it's going to default usually to a, let me see what it defaults to, just a minute. Yeah, see, it's defaulting to a quantity of 1, so if you haven't changed that on a quantity of 0, if you haven't changed that a bunch, you might have a bunch of quantities as 0, and you might quickly want to make all of those into a 1. So let's update our quantities, and we're going to use the button called Update Default Quantities to 1 if there is no measure. There is another one to put those back to 0 if you decide to, if there is no measure. But let's use this button. So now all default quantities that were 0 without a measure have been updated to a 1, and our data will refresh. And if we go up here and look around, we'll see that ones without quantities now all have 1s in them. I can't even remember which ones we were looking at, but we can't really find any. The only ones that have 0s are probably ones that have measures in them, etc. So that's how you can quickly get those quantities so that you don't have to keep typing them into a new budget. First of all, before I go create a new budget, I'd like to point out something, and then we'll see how it shows up on the budget. But notice this column for direct or indirect. In our previous video, we talked about how direct represents hard costs and indirect represents soft costs, and that can be handy to print some totals of your budget, total for direct and totals for indirect, and I'll try to remember to show you that in a minute. Notice down here we start getting into indirect things like superintendents, laborers, wages, various things that have to do with field office expenses is what this builder has decided to mark as indirect. And I just wanted to point that out, and I'll show you when I create a budget here in a minute after we talk about one more thing. And the other thing has to do with, let's go up here and look at, I think it's septic, that I have some notes to show you. Notice this, no, it's sewer service. Notice I'm going to go ahead and click the pencil edit icon, but no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to click over here. It says default notes for the budget. and for this particular cost code. So I'm going to click that button that says budget. And notice that I've typed both for internal and rich text buyer notes on, that will print on budget reports or job proposals that I say I want to show the buyer notes. And you can make those really pretty and nice, or you might just want to have some internal notes load when you load the budget. And these are notes that will load when you start a new budget based on the cost code master. Notice that if I click in the one called rich text, that means we're going to get a rich text box where we can do things to make things prettier or make them certain colors. But these are some notes this builder has in here for the sewer service. And I think that's the only notes because I put it in here for an example. And then this could be some basic internal notes that you choose to have that might not be the same as what you're doing for your buyer. If you type a bunch of internal notes, you can use this button to copy those internal notes up here to the buyer notes, and then click in the box and do what you like to those buyer notes. It might be a little different than your internal notes. And I'll show you how that shows up on a new budget. So back under our Home tab, our main menu, let's get to the place where we can look at a demo job that we have set up and then create a brand new budget for it real quickly. This video is not totally about creating a new budget, but we're going to do it a real quick one for you. So let's collapse by clicking here at the top of this where we went to the cost codes master, and let's go over here to jobs, budgets, bids. And first I'd like to go to our list of jobs where we set up jobs, because I'd like to show you something about a demo job that we set up, and I happen to know that its code starts with a V, so I'll click a V up here. And our demo job is this Vista 3813. And I'm going to click the pencil edit icon to show you just a couple of things that we did when we were setting up the job. And there will be other videos about setting up jobs. This is not all about setting up this job. What we want to look at on this screen is that we have down here some defaults that we set in for the top 6 measures: frame square feet, living square feet, slab. And there's buttons here where you edit those, add or edit these, or set up some default priority measures, and that's in a whole other video. But what I wanted to point out is the frame square feet at 5298 and the living square feet at 4300 for this job. And I'd just like you to remember that's set up on the job setup window, and to remember what those numbers are. So what we need to do, let's close this, and we can go ahead and close this jobs list. And let's go back. It'll be on the Home tab. This is a main menu in progress right now. And let's go select Job Budgets. We had a choice either to go to the Jobs dashboard and work on a whole bunch of stuff for one job. But in this case, and you can open the job budget or create a new one from there. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and open a list of all jobs with budgets and jobs without budgets. And if you scroll down here, you're going to see our demo job, Vista 3813, has a button, has a link for Create Budget because it's in the list without budgets. So let's go ahead and click that about creating a budget for this job. And you're going to get some choices when you create a new budget. You can create budgets from Cost Codes Master. You can copy a budget from another job, etc., etc. And this still is not totally about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to select with Cost Codes Master and pricing defaults with those default notes. So the pricing defaults we were talking about will come in, and those default budget notes that we were talking about. And I'm not going to select to do it with items. Most of the time you might. Those items that I described in the earlier video that you can set up behind, you can bring all those items in. But, I think I'll just go ahead and do that. So, yes, include item photos. No, we want to speed this up, so we'll just say we're not including photos because we're actually not probably going to look at the items in this tutorial. So it says it's been created, and if you're using the jobs dashboard, just click on that. If you're on the window with a list of jobs, the list will refresh and it'll be in the list now of jobs with budgets. So let's go down to that demo job. It's now up in this list, and look how it already has an amount for the budget. And that is because of using those pricing master defaults and the measures from the job, and we'll take a look at that. This doesn't mean this budget is done, it's just brought in all the defaults for the stuff that we set up defaults for. So to open that budget, we'll click on that budget amount. Now let's take a look at our plumbing that I was talking about earlier, which is like $3,600, and there's search features to go straight there without scrolling if you want. But let's just go ahead and look at our plumbing here. Notice that it's brought in 4,300 for the living square feet, because it looked to see if there was any, because we set up living square feet as a default in our cost codes master that we brought in. So in the process then CHS said, well, is there any living square feet set up for the job? It brought it in, and if we click on it, just click on that line, you're going to see that it brought in our default unit price, $4.60, and that it's splitting it into thirds. So we'll take the quantity times the quantity percent times the unit price and come up with actually a third, because of that 33.33% of the total that we want to do for that. So you'll see how that's just brought those numbers in. Let's go take a look at framing labor, which I believe is $31.50. Notice the frame square feet is the $52.98 that we brought in, and it's taken a default price that we set up for framing labor on the cost codes master. See this unit price of $4.50, and it's the $52.98, so that's why it's supplying an amount already for framing labor. You can always change that. Maybe this has gone way up to $5 or who knows what. And then once you change it, it'll change the amount and you can submit it. We're not going to talk about any of these other fields on this screen. I'm just wanting to show you how it brought in these numbers for you. So let's go also look at the utility connection ones. Up here somewhere is all those utility connections. There they are, under 1,400. And you'll see that it brought in those 5 months, and there must have been a unit price. There was a unit price there, so 5 times whatever that unit price is right here. If you hover over it, you can actually see that the unit price was $90. You see that little thing that pops up when I hover over it. In this case, unit price was $385 times 5 months, and you're getting a total. So it's telling you how that budget, without clicking on the line, how that budget number got there. So let's take a look at the sewer service one that has those default notes in it. So you'll notice over here for the sewer service, here's those default notes coming on into this budget, because we had default notes for this particular cost code. Here's the internal notes and here's the buyer notes. So I just wanted to point that out. Of course, you can change these now, and then you can open a bunch of different ones and write your own notes about this particular job. But I wanted to show you that. Oh, I wanted to do something else there. Let's go ahead and open that, because notice that the amount is 0. Let's go ahead and, but a quantity of 1 came in. Remember how we told it to default to 1, everything that had zeros in it, so that we didn't have to type in a quantity of 1 every time? So that 1 came in, so let's just say, I'm not clicking right because something was happening there. Sorry. It's weird because it's in the video. So I'm just changing that to 5,000. And I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And we'll close it. So the next thing I'd like to show you, again, this is not all about setting up a budget. There's whole videos about that. But in the menu over here on the left, there's something called Budget, etc. Reports. I'm making it expand, and I want to open all budget reports. And then it's telling me I haven't set a price for this because it's a brand new thing. So the price of various things won't, or the builder fee and stuff won't show up on the reports. It's just telling me about that. But I'm going to go ahead and continue to budget reports. And please watch videos about setting up different styles for what you can have in the header and the footer of your budget reports. You might have one, this is a proposal, not a budget, or a construction budget title. that kind of thing. I'm just going to use our budget default because this video is not about doing all of that. But what I wanted to show you is that direct and indirect stuff that I was talking about. And you'll notice these are various, basically same buttons in all these 3 columns, but you can do reports that only show your budgeted costs, a report that shows budgeted and marked up, and we haven't set any markup on this, so I won't be opening that, and marked up only, and I won't be opening that because we haven't set it up. We'll just use budgeted costs only for this. And when you're talking about direct and indirect and giving the total of hard costs to, I think it's the builder's risk insurance, it would be the total of all these direct costs. Notice how we have a section for direct costs, and if you scroll down this report, get near the bottom, there's not as many indirect costs, but then we start a part for indirect costs. But right here you can get the total of what your hard costs are, your direct and indirect hard costs, and I wanted to show you that, and then you get the whole total of whatever we've got our budget at now, and we're missing prices. Plus, this should be sent to a PDF for the best view. This is just what is called the first opening that opens fast. It's called an HTML view. It's more like a draft, doesn't have page numbers, that kind of thing, and you would go ahead and export to PDF to get all of that. So let's close that. And then let's do one with all notes. Take a look at that sewer service, I believe. Notice that here it says at the top of this report that internal notes will be in gray and italics, and the buyer notes will not be. And so you can see those notes showing up there. So that one's one with all the notes, but you could do one with buyer notes only so that they don't see all your internal notes. So on the utility connections, you'll notice that it's starting to just show the buyer notes. And that's available for all of these. If you have a fixed contract, you'll be doing a marked up only probably. If it's a cost plus markup job, you'll be doing these. But it's the same kind of concept for all of those. So I just wanted to show you that, and let me check my notes. I think that's all. But you see how quickly you can open a new job budget and have a whole bunch of your numbers in here for you by setting up your cost codes master to have the defaults. And you might want to do a bunch of those budget default notes so that they would explain what that cost code is about. I want to show you one more thing, but I can't remember where we did it, so never mind. Let me go ahead and click on sewer service again. I'm not going to do never mind. If you need to change something about those master defaults that we've been talking about in this video, when you click to edit a budget line, there's a link right here for master defaults. I think I showed it to you in the last video to show you how notes about this is just general notes to your users. It's not notes printing on the budget. It's just notes about what this cost code is for to your users, to yourself, a note you make to yourself, what is this cost code about? Right here you can set up defaults. We already have the default of 1, but this is the same as opening the cost codes thing from the other cost codes master list. So while you're working on the budget and you realize that there's something different you want to do about the defaults, you can click this to read about the defaults, and it'll tell you all about them, things that we've been talking about. And that is also available. Let's go ahead and close this. Back on our cost codes master, it's also available right up here, read about the defaults. That's just in case you want to quickly look at stuff that I've been talking about those master defaults. And so that's all I'd like to say about setting up these various default quantities and default notes for the budget. I'm going to, you'll notice this says budget default notes. If you see the budget word here, and this says default notes for POs. And in the next video, I'd like to talk about that, or unless I put some video in between, but I'll be talking about those default notes for purchase orders. Thank you very much for watching.